So the first one, Gokhan, you were wanting to know from John about the. I'll read off the question here. What was the most challenging aspect of working in the public sector as an industrial engineer? And then what kind of skills do you think ISEs need to have to effectively work with public sector entities?
I think perhaps the biggest challenge is that, and it may be the challenge everywhere, is that people in the public sector really don't know what industrial engineers are, which is really quite fascinating in a way, because if you look at it, the profession of city managers and the profession of industrial engineers both go back to the same scientific management movement in the late 1800s. So really the roots of city management and industrial engineering start in the same place, right down to the fact that I think the first city manager was hired during the same year that industrial engineering was created. So both of them are very similar, but a lot of times people don't understand what an industrial engineer does, and don't understand exactly how scientific management from an industrial engineer's perspective fits into scientific management from a city manager's perspective. So that's a challenge. And I think, as I said, I mean, I think that what's been most successful for me has been having that systems thinking ability and being able to go into pretty much any kind of situation and listen, and after a while of listening, begin to see how pieces fit together that a lot of times the people who are very involved in the details never see. And so all of a sudden they think you're coming up with these great insights, which to me is just understanding what they're doing. They're just not lifting their head up to see what's going on around them. They're focused on the minutia. So that systems thinking and interdisciplinary management types of functions that you learn in industrial engineering, I think are really, really beneficial.
Another question is, if one were an undergrad student and had the opportunity to do an internship in the public sector under a PE in civil engineering, would you be inspired to take civil engineering / environmental engineering classes for your electives? Or would you be inspired to get your FE and maybe a PE?
Well, I do have a PE, and a PE in industrial engineering. I work, like I said, right now I manage a company that's largely made up of civil, environmental, and chemical engineers. But again, my talent there is seeing how all those pieces fit together and seeing how they contribute to sustainability and knowing what I don't know. And I think that's one of the key things. So I think in direct answer to the question, I did an interdisciplinary undergraduate where I combined industrial engineering and took civil engineering and environmental engineering courses at the same time, and urban planning courses, to see how all of those pieces fit together. So I think there is some value in that side of the equation, but then I do think getting your EIT and getting your PE, and my PE is in industrial engineering, not in civil engineering, but in the public sector, having a PE is very valuable as far as legitimacy goes. So I think that's an important track to be on. And to apply for your PE, you don't have to work under, like if you're getting your PE in industrial engineering, you don't necessarily have to be working under an industrial engineer as long as you're working under a PE.
Okay. Good to know. I think the next question kind of helps. I think that leads into our panel discussion here. So Gokhan, if you want to chime in on this one as well. What are the greatest barriers to convincing decision makers to value and consider sustainability in the systems in which they have influence? And what kind of factors should be emphasized in making the sustainable case?
Gokhan, you want to go ahead? You're on mute.
Sure. Sure. So interestingly, I have read an article last night on Time Magazine. In the very last section, there was this CEO of the company, Sompo. I think it's a Japanese company that is in IT right now. They are really putting a lot of efforts in creating resources for the sustainable development problems in the entire society. So we are talking about barriers. So one thing we right now at our hand that we are suffering is we are not fully able to incentivize the sustainability efforts in industrial processes, in decision-making processes. So we are living in an economy that basically focuses on growing the profit margin. So we have to grow the economy. Companies need to grow their outputs, and most of these companies have some interest in sustainability, sustainable development, but the incentive is not very huge that could push the sector. In the public sector, there is also there's no strong push for the public sector to make things really better. So the current economic system that we are right now living is we have an open economy. So we have customers that demand these services and products, and typically they don't really strongly demand the sustainable services and sustainable products. Therefore, the supplies that we have are not really 100% sustainable. So this goes back to discussion to how do we address the educational component. I mean, we are right now literally at the edge of losing our planet, and we all know this, and we are probably taking actions in individuals. But when we look at the big picture, we still, I think, need big pushes in many industries that are driven by the public sector leaders and private sector leaders.
I would take it from a different perspective, which is what I had said before about the lesson of the gentleman who spoke at the conference in Dakar in Senegal. I think we're framing the question wrong. And I think that's one of the things that there seems to be a lot of evidence in corporations right now, where originally they would hire somebody to come in and be their sustainability director. And at first, a lot of these companies thought that was really a public relations thing. It was a good corporate citizenship to do this. But what they discovered was that a lot of the work that helped make the company a good corporate citizen were things like the work, Brian, that you've done in companies and such. It's about eliminating waste. It's about recycling. It's about doing these things. And so originally, the sustainability director sort of sat with the marketing department and the public relations department. But eventually, in some companies, they're now being brought into the operations side of the business, because what companies are discovering is that by doing those things, you actually not only are saving the planet, you're making the company more profitable and doing things that will help operations, help the bottom line. So I think that's one of the things is, pointing out that, and I think that's one of the areas where industrial engineers are uniquely qualified, is by pointing out that all of these things that we're doing to make you more sustainable also help the bottom line of the company in most cases. And also, as there's more and more push on the part of investors to do sustainable investing, because sustainability has sort of two definitions. One is we need to have a sustainable planet for you to have customers as a company. But the other is you also need to have a sustainable business model on how, in the face of all of these changes, you're going to survive in this economy. And so investors are more and more, Wall Street funds and stuff like that are more and more looking at what is your sustainability plan? How are you going about doing this? Because we want to make sure that the company that we're investing in, A, is going to have customers, and B, is going to be around. So how we frame what we do, I think, has a big deal to do with how successful we're going to be in influencing people. It's not necessarily the technical skills. We have those. It's how do we frame it and sell it.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think really trying to pull in the voice of the customers and those stakeholders and share how important that is. I mean, if they see that their customers are going in this direction and that could improve sales, what business is going to argue with going in that direction, right? So I think when they see and make that connection with who they're, and the employees as well, I mean, if they're finding that they're struggling to attract talent and this can help them bring in and fill job positions that they need, you know, there's other benefits that go along with some of the sustainability efforts that are more than, you know, sometimes it's financial, and it's great when it lines up that way. Like energy costs oftentimes are easier to sell because they have a direct cost they're paying, but some of the externality costs can be hard to quantify and they don't pay it. So you have to try to bring that to the table so they can at least see that they are having an impact, even though there's not on their financial statements. But the systems view, I think, is really what opens up the idea around the employees and the customer base and the local community and the, you know, just the goodwill that it drives and the attracting people to their region and stuff, and that can make it easier to hire. You know, I think all those things are hard to see unless you have kind of that broader view and know where to go look for to other benefits that may be hard for the organizations to see firsthand or directly in the way that they normally look at their decision making.
Even some of that, though, has financial components in that everybody points out that retaining a good employee is much less expensive than finding a good employee. And most of the surveys now show that employees want to work for a company that is doing more than just making a profit. And so if you don't do that, you're probably going to lose your good employees to somebody else, and then you're going to incur the cost of having to hire new.
Absolutely. Let's see if there's any other questions. If you have some, please type them in. How about, and John, you alluded to this, but how does an ISE find work and get work in sustainability? Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I think, you know, that is the difficulty, but I think part of it is looking a little bit outside the box. You know, it's like even looking at in the public sector, for example, you know, you don't have to be looking for a job that says industrial engineer. Sometimes you don't even have to be looking for a job that says engineer. And especially in sustainability, you know, there are more and more courses and more colleges that are offering degrees in sustainability of one form or another. But for the most part, you find people who are sustainability managers. Some are engineers, some are former city managers, some are have a marketing degree or you know, some sort of liberal arts degree. It's all over the place. There isn't any one way of doing it. So you really have to look at what is the content. I mean, I've had several jobs where I saw the description and I saw what they were looking for as far as a degree. And I ended up writing a letter with my application explaining why my background actually fit the job better than what they were looking for. And in a couple of cases, I got the job because they're just shooting in the dark at a little bit. The other side of it is, you know, I view like Institute of Industrial and Systems Engineer as a way to keep up with the tools of my profession. But I also belong to like the Water Environment Federation. I belong to the International Society of Sustainability Professionals and organizations like that where you hear about, I look at it as, and even in my graduate degree, I said, you know, I got my industrial engineering degree because I wanted those tools. I got the degree in public policy and public administration because that was the sandbox I wanted to play in. And you need to have both sides. So, you know, joining some of these organizations that if you're interested in sustainability, join the International Society of Sustainability Professionals or organizations like that, where you can network and hear things of what's available and then see how your skills, then you have to sell your skills as being the ones that fit into that the best.
Gokhan, did you have any comments, or what are some of the students that have gone through your program? Are they finding work in sustainability, or are they, how has that been going? Or do you see opportunities coming up that have more of this lens to the job descriptions?
I think what John explained was, to me, I think the case sufficient. And you should be really, I'm going to emphasize the same thing. You should be open-minded about the job opportunities in the industry. Sustainable development, sustainability initiatives have taken up seriously by various industries, not only manufacturing industries. Many companies are, every day they are getting a little bit, day by day, they are getting better. And if you're interested in this field, this is great. No matter where you go, if you can bring the sustainability perspective into the business that you are working in, that's even more valuable. You can function as a quality engineer, or you can function as a production engineer, you can function as a systems engineer, but you are always in one important part of this entire value chain. So we are talking about products and services, and we have a value chain. Then we have to be very smart about the entire life cycle. We get the materials from the earth, and we convert them into certain raw materials, and we produce products, we design products, we make a lot of decisions as engineers. Therefore, all these decisions really require to kind of to pause and then zoom out and look at what you are doing. Is this really sustainable? You can always ask this question because sustainability is supposed to be in every phase of our decision-making initiatives across the industries. So therefore, if you have this mindset, down the road, this will be really important, and you can make a huge difference no matter what type of organization that you are working for. This should be the mindset you should carry on and learning more about, and how you can integrate into your career. And there might not be so many open, so-called like sustainability engineer type of job or opportunities, but that's totally fine. If you have this interest and passion, you can always be a contributor to this initiative.
Yeah, and I'll second that too. When I started to get more into sustainability, I had just a, traditional continuous improvement role. And so I just went out and found projects that I wanted to work on. So I just started to insert myself into opportunities and say, can we do a project or try to improve this one area? I think this, would really get me really excited about this potential opportunity and help make that into a potential project that I could work on. So inside of my role, just looking for those opportunities in the organization, and there was no sustainability title to my job, but you just try to find those opportunities and network with the people internally. And if you're already at a company, I went and started meeting with the environment, safety, and health team. I said, I would like to be on a team. How can I get more involved? And hoping that someday that there might be some opportunities that would come out of that. And I'll also recommend what John said, outside of your organization, go to the organizations that are doing the work that you like. Maybe pick one of those sustainable development goals, find an organization that is already working on those things, and go to their meetings and start to talk to people. And what you'll find out, like John mentioned, is you're bringing a whole new set of skills to them that they probably don't have or don't realize that they're lacking. And so you can go in there and with some very simple concepts, you can make a lot of change happen, or at least get their eyes open to the possibilities. And then they'll say, boy, I could really use someone with your skill set. I don't think they even realize they don't have that skill set. So I've seen that with like some of the nonprofits, is they're working really hard and it's not as efficient as it could be. And so even little simple tools and concepts have go a long way with those groups. But you just find a group that you're really passionate around, and then you'll find out very quickly how you can help them out.
I think one of the things that industrial engineers, at least some industrial engineers, bring to the table is that a lot of engineers, and especially I find it with civil engineers and others, they're very transaction oriented in a way. They wait for the request for proposals to come out, and then they react to the request for proposal. The idea that they should be higher up in the food chain and be the ones deciding what projects get done or what policies get made to make those, and that maybe we should be consulting with department heads or boards as opposed to project managers, is something that for a lot of engineers is like, oh, well, that's above my pay grade. But I think for a lot of industrial engineers, that's exactly where we want to be playing, and that's where the fun is. And so, you know, if that's the way you feel, yeah, get involved from the ground up, but start, you know, looking for ways that you can have an influence on planning, that you can have an influence on policy making.
Anything else to add on that? I don't see any other questions. If there are, please type them into the questions box so we can address those. I've got another question we can talk through. What are the IISE training and skills most relevant for work in sustainability?
Well, I mean, like I said, I personally, you know, I lean back on the system thinking stuff. And again, this goes to even, you know, your question of how, or the question before of how do you get involved in those things? There are many sort of thought leaders on Twitter, on LinkedIn, with regard to things like circular economy. Green Biz has some great stuff in terms of sustainability. And I think, you know, and my point being that things like circular economy and there's system thinking groups and stuff, they're all looking at the kinds of skills that industrial engineers have. And sometimes they don't know that those skills are grounded in industrial engineering. I mean, even the Lean Six Sigma stuff, it's amazing how many people, you know, they took this one certification course once upon a time, and they don't necessarily know that that's grounded in 100 years of industrial engineering development and such. And so, you know, I think that whole systems thinking and understanding how the pieces fit together and what is waste and those kinds of skills are very valuable when it comes to dealing with sustainability types of issues. And how you bring, it goes back to, is the sum greater, is the whole greater than the sum of the parts? And I think that we have a skill in creating that. And I guess the one last thing I would say is that we have to sort of check the ego at the door as far as us being the expert in everything. That what we're the expert in is how to bring people together and bring the best out of the experts in their individual field so that we can create a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. We don't have to know everything about everything. Gokhan,
yeah, I will second on being a good team player, because the problems that right now we are facing in sustainability, they are complex problems. There was one presentation in my session yesterday from Trinidad Tobago, I believe, from South America, and they were talking about sargassum problem, that they were having so many sargassum filling up the beaches in Puerto Rico and the entire region because of the deforestation in the Amazon and the fertilizer use in the agricultural, farming. So there are practices all around us. Some of them are not sustainable, and it ends up creating a problem somewhere else. So these problems are really complex, and it really does require a work that can only be done with engaging all the stakeholders. Therefore, from IE perspective, first of all, how do you find these problems? Probably you will need to measure how bad the problem is. Therefore, measurement, it brings you down to the data analytics skills. It brings you down to the how can you frame that problem. It brings you down to the finding the people, finding the stakeholders who are going to be right organizations, right people to work with. And this picture is not going to be different if you're working in private sector or if you're working in academia, if you're working in public sector. You need to define a problem and then find the stakeholders who are going to be part of it, who are going to be shedding light to the solution, and then create value. So at the end of the day, people are going to ask what the value for the society, or what the value for the company, what the value for the organization that you're working on. So you should be always also looking at how you can create that value. In terms of skills, I'm going to stress a lot about the data analytics skills. It's across all the industries right now. Most of the industries right now, we are seeing that, especially after the pandemic, they are more analytics oriented. They are getting their people and systems connected over online platforms. So they are collecting data. So these type of skills, I think, crucial for anyone who wants to work in the broad area of sustainable development.
And I want to both reinforce that and also take it in a slightly different direction, which is something I touched upon in my talk. And you mentioned these are compound, complex issues that we're dealing with, and they're very hard to get your hands around. It's very hard to come up with metrics. It's very hard to come up with ways to measure things. I think one of the skills that industrial engineers have is an ability to understand what are the cause and effect relationships. How do you, even if you can't measure them directly, what are the measures that you can use as a proxy for the stuff that you would like to be able to measure but really can't? And sometimes people get so caught up in wanting to collect detailed data that they get analysis paralysis, and they never get the project done. And they go, well, we couldn't give you an answer because we couldn't get the data. It was too expensive. It wasn't available. When in fact, if they had come up with good proxies for those data from the stuff that was available, if they had rethought their metrics and said, well, we'd like to be measuring this, but the closest we can get is that. And that still is defensible. It is still something that's going to give us insight and allow us to make better decisions. So it's that creativity with the data and with the process to say, okay, we don't live in a perfect world. Perfect data isn't available, but our job is to help decision makers make better decisions. And given what's available, how can we creatively come up with information, with data and metrics that makes it so they're going to make a better decision? It's not perfect, but it's better.
Yeah, and I'll add too that I think look at your own skill set and leverage that for whatever you're good at. There's analytical people, and then there's people who are really good with facilitation and team building and getting people organized and making sure everyone's contributing to the conversation and dealing with leadership and change management. And so take your skills that you really like to do and look for opportunities there, and then pull in those resources who can help you with those specific needs. And so, like I said, kind of, if you're kind of the conductor of this whole exercise, you're not going to be playing all the instruments, right? You might be able to jump in and play the tuba or something, but you need other people who can jump in and contribute to make it successful. And like Gokhan was going through very good analysis there. And my background is statistics, but I couldn't do a PCA analysis off the top of my head. I'd have to go back through all my books, right? So even if people are really good at that skill, doesn't mean you have that specific skill for that specific need. And so really, I think our roles are about trying to say, you know, there is a way we can do that. There is an analysis out there. I don't necessarily know it, but I'm going to go reach out and we'll find somebody who can come in who actually really likes this and is really good at that skill. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I tell people that the key is that I don't necessarily know the answers, but I know the right questions. And one last thing I'll say on this skill set, because I didn't mention it before, is I think communication skills and, you know, when I talk about how do you frame the answer, but how do you communicate it? How can you translate the technical for a non-technical audience? How can you write it up? How can you make graphics that depict what's going on? Are tremendous skill sets. And I can't tell you the number of students when I was doing some teaching and stuff, they spend all of their time trying to get the numbers right and the analysis right. And then they try and whip together a report to turn in the last, you know, 3 or 4 hours. And so that, you know, and I've seen that in professional work as well, where, you know, what I've found is that poorly done work that's presented really well can oftentimes have more influence than great work that's presented poorly. And so, you know, if you want your work to have the value that you want it to have, set aside the time to present it well and gain the skills to communicate and present it well as the skills to do all that analysis.
Maybe some of you have been reading articles about the change the retail industry is going through because of the COVID. Now they are being more interconnected. I had a talk with one of my colleagues who's working in at Walmart as a principal data scientist, and she and I we both went to same school. So she had a great presentation to our students on how they utilize the data. Nowadays, Walmart is, and most of the retail industry, we can call Amazon, Walmart, name it. Most of the retail industry is right now making the customer's experience much more customized and much more unique to the customer's needs. And this disruption that we are seeing in the retail industry, it's going to affect all industries because of the supply chain relationships between retail industry and all other industries. So this is going to create a huge disruption in all industries. That includes education, that includes the service industries. Day by day, we are going to be more adopting the technologies, like we are right now adopting a new technology. We are able to do a conference virtually and getting people together, and the amount of people who are going to be needed to solve these complex problems, it's going to be huge in the area of data analytics, in the area of data science. And this is going to also impact the area that sustainability initiatives are also targeted. So I can't stress enough about my friends who are about to graduate or who are in the market looking for. These skills are going to be key, and we can see that not only industrial engineering programs, but many programs, business colleges, name it, other social science colleges, they are also adopting the new curriculum strategies that focuses on analytics of data, extraction of data from a problem, and finding meaning, reaching to a meaning. And also, like John said, conveying a value to the audience. These are going to be the key skills with an increased demands in the following years. And there right now, they put all, like on a daily basis, they produce, I can't remember what the number she gave me, but around 500 million gigabyte of data per day at Walmart because of the transactions. They need to make decisions that will be more sustainably delivering the product to the customers, whether it's a curbside pickup, whether it's a e-commerce application, whether it's a pickup from store, or whether it's a direct shipment to the customer's house, stuff like that. All of this experience that we are right now having as a customer, it's changing, and it's going to change dramatically, and this change will impact all the industries. Therefore, to understand this change, data science, data analytics skills will be really the key for any person who wants to really work in a work environment in future.
Again, taking Gokhan's point even further, one of the things people used to kid me that, they'd ask me a question and I'd produce a spreadsheet. Because I'd always be doing detailed analysis. I'd go away for 3 days and come back with the answer. Finally, one of my bosses at one point said, at your point in your career, people aren't hiring you for your analytical capability. They're hiring you for the insights and the knowledge that you've gained from doing 20 years of the analytical stuff. So I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of industrial engineers do end up in management and policy making levels, is we have, through our experience of really understanding the data and going through the data, we have then gotten to the point where we have the wisdom and knowledge of that. And what people want to pay you the big bucks for is I don't want you to come in and look at my organization. I can hire somebody much cheaper to come in and do that. What I want you to do is come in and take a quick look at my organization and tell me what types of people I should hire to do the detail work, because you've been there, you've done that, and you can give us that kind of guidance. So in terms of a career path, I think Gokhan's right, understanding and being able to do the deep dive into the data at least once or twice is really important. But then it's a matter of how do you change that into information and wisdom is how you're going to advance your career.
John, you said that position you had at City of Detroit, what year was that? That
was back around 1980.
Okay.
And one of the things I think is interesting, I don't think that office still exists, but I do know somebody who works for the City of Detroit right now, and lean engineering and lean construction is mandated within the engineering department.
That's what I was going to add, is there is, I think we're really on the cusp of the government agencies taking off with lean methodology and process improvement. We saw that with our own city. The city of Fort Collins is getting even more aggressive with their program. That's coming from probably influence from the city of Denver, who's had a pretty robust program for the last 5 or 6 years. State of Washington, right where close to where I'm at, has had a very good program for probably a decade now, and that's continuing to grow. And so I think these jobs in government agencies looking for ISE skills is going to continue to grow too. So, and if not, go reach out to them and show them, here's what our state's doing. Here's what the other cities are doing. Here's what the neighboring state is doing. The competition is something that's really intriguing. And they'll say, well, what is the city of Detroit doing, and why are they doing that? And look at the results they're publishing on. So I see the next 4 or 5 years as huge growth in that government agency realm for these skills.
Well, the City of Detroit's productivity office actually was funded by the auto industry as their contribution, their good citizenship. And in fact, the head of the office was a retired industrial engineer from Chrysler that Chrysler was paying to do that kind of work. And right now I'm doing some process analysis work. In fact, there's a bunch of technical memoranda that I'm supposed to be editing right now instead of being at this conference, but I put it off. Looking at 11 different functions of the water utilities for Baltimore County and City of Baltimore. And one of those functions is their performance measurement and continuous improvement office. So, you know, they have those things out there. Again, you just have to look. And I'm sure, and I'm actually going to go back and talk to them after the project is done. But I know that those people in the continuous improvement office are not industrial engineers, and I don't know that they really know, you know, what's out there that could be supporting them, but they're doing a great job trying to figure out how to make things better.
Looks like we're out of time here, but I'm just going to note that the state of Iowa did the same thing. The businesses came to the state of Iowa and said, we're trying to grow our business and your construction permitting is taking too long. You're holding us back. Are you using these techniques? And if not, we will teach you. And that's how they got started. So I think it does often come from sometimes the businesses asking for it and saying, we will even teach you and get you started with this. So yeah, it's great. Well, I'd like to thank all of you for your contribution, and Gokhan and John, great talking to you again and seeing you. And hopefully next year we can talk to each other in person.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I
Good
look
to
forward
talk to you,
to it.
Gokhan.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Brian. Good talking with you, John. Thank you.
Yeah.